Thank you, everyone. I'm Ed McCann. I'm the founder of Writers Read, and I'm one of your hosts for today's show. Writers Read creates performance opportunities for writers, and that is whether they are established or emerging and whether published or not, because it's not about publishing credits. It's about the ability to tell a good story and craft a good story and present it within 5 minutes. All of the essays we feature on our stage, our YouTube channel, and our publications and our podcast are a maximum of 650 words, which translates to a 5-minute spoken word performance. We are delighted to be back here at City Winery's flagship location here in New York City to present Body Language, True Stories of Illness, Recovery, and Discovery, which is a collaboration with Bellevue Literary Review, celebrating their 25 years of award-winning independent literary journal. Now, we often think of stories as things we write down or speak aloud, but our bodies have been keeping a record long before we find the words. Every scar, every catch in the breath, every recovery is a narrative of resilience, and today we are bringing those silent stories to the stage. We chose the title Body Language because the body is the first thing to experience the crisis and the last thing to forget it, and the writers you're about to meet are giving the voice to that physical and emotional experience. We are also thrilled to welcome Jeffrey Brown, senior correspondent for PBS NewsHour, as well as producer Sam Weber and videographer Eric O'Connor, who are here to record and report on the proceedings. And to get the show rolling, please join me now in welcoming to the stage my co-host, BLR's editor-in-chief, Dr. Danielle Ofri.
So here's the scene. The 16 North Medical Ward at Bellevue Hospital, the nation's oldest public hospital. And amidst the daily chaos of cardiac arrests, GI bleeds, sepsis, there's a windowless conference room with 3 doctors, 2 poets, 1 fiction writer. And the idea of creating a literary journal from the stories around us was born. And I don't think any of us could have imagined we'd still be here 25 years later. BLR, Bellevue Literary Review, a quarter-century later, is now a full-fledged independent literary arts organization with our award-winning journal, plus writing workshops, book salons, storytelling events, book clubs, poetry and dance films, and of course, an incredible community of people who see writing, the creative arts, poetry, and storytelling as ways to grapple with the vulnerabilities of illness, health, and healing. So we are so excited that you're all here with us today to kick off BLR's 25th anniversary. And today, we have a remarkable group of writers who will be digging exactly into prime BLR territory. What happens when our bodies or minds mutiny on us? How do we manage this startling array of internal rebellions? What does it take to heal the wounds that fissure up both externally and internally? Today, you just might get some answers. Connecticut-based Rebecca Dimian is an award-winning author, editor, and professor. She wrote the 2023 memoir Chronic, detailing her journey with illness, and the novel Waiting for Beirut. Widely published in outlets like Vox and Yahoo Health, she balances writing with teaching and family adventures and opens our show now with her story, The Hospital Bag. Please give a warm welcome to Rebecca Dimian.
On the night my daughter was born, the kitchen was a mess, the crib hadn't been built, and the overnight bag was an unchecked item on my to-do list. We hadn't even made arrangements for the dog. It was the middle of November, and I was 36 weeks pregnant when a warm rush of water woke me like an unexpected alarm clock in the middle of the night. I turned to my sleeping husband and said, honey, I think my water broke. In any other situation, Greg would have responded with something witty or sarcastic like, wait, you're pregnant? But he was about to become a father 1 month early, and humor was a non-starter. Let's go, we gotta go. I'm not ready, like at all. What? How? He was already out of bed and pulling on pants. I was still lying in a blooming puddle of amniotic fluid. He had a point. Contractions had started at 29 weeks in the middle of my freshman composition class. Between genre discussions and questions about an upcoming essay assignment, I felt unfamiliar cramping. As a woman who has suffered from chronic endometriosis since my early 20s, I was not bothered by this new discomfort, except for the fact that I was pregnant, and any variation from normal obviously called for DEFCON 5 level crisis mode. To be fair, my pregnancy was considered high risk, since in addition to endometriosis, I also had a hyperactive thyroid and a baby that seemed reluctant to grow. With the advent of preterm contractions, the doctors sentenced me to bed rest. I continued teaching online and ignored impending motherhood as best I could, even though the likelihood of an early birth was increasing daily with the severity and frequency of the contractions. Before I started growing a human inside my temperamental uterus, I had spent half a decade adapting to chronic illness. I learned how to manage endo pain, how to navigate messy days, and in order to accomplish this feat, I fastidiously controlled the food I ate, the supplements I took, even the temperature of the water I drank. Now I had to reconfigure everything, my rituals and routines, to accommodate pregnancy. My cravings were unpredictable and did not adhere to my strict gluten-free light dairy diet. I couldn't take my Chinese herbs. I even had to cut back on my consumption of matcha tea, although my other herbal favorites were okay. My carefully curated holistic veneer was cracking, and I couldn't do a thing about it. The only thing I could control is how I prepared for my sweet baby's arrival. While some expectant mothers create Pinterest boards devoted to hospital overnight bags, search for the perfect pair of slippers and matching bathrobe, compile a diverse selection of snacks for a potential lengthy labor, and pick out an adorable going-home outfit for the baby, I hadn't even bought a nursing bra. Denial looked like baby shower gifts left in their boxes in an empty red duffel bag. My husband was gracious and understanding with my moods and lack of preparedness. In fact, literally the only thing he had asked me to do in preparation for our daughter's birth was to pack a go bag. So what did I do? I'll tell you what I didn't do. Pack the hospital bag. When I reached back inside the memory of the night my daughter was born, I still can't find the shape of a toothbrush or hair products or cute little onesies. I don't remember grabbing a change of clothes, but I must have since I didn't wear the same pajamas for 5 days. I do remember the fear, the anxiety, the not knowing, the loss of control. I remember the chronically ill mother I wasn't ready to become. But mostly I remember the frantic voice of my husband, "Grab the hospital bag," and my response, "What bag?"
Tamara Ellen's career spans 15 years in nonprofit fundraising, a decade in corporate communications, and a start at Random House, where she engaged in a constant battle to reduce the slush pile. In 2016, she pivoted to become a Hudson Valley chef and B&B owner. Now living in Brooklyn and focusing on soulful pursuits, Tamara and her husband have 2 adult children, and she spends her time writing, traveling, and being idolized by her chihuahua. She makes her second trip to our stage today to present her story, Say Yes to the Rest. Please say hello to Tamara Ellen.
Mid-pandemic, I tried to tell my 96-year-old mother, Roz, that her granddaughter, my darling, brilliant Claudia, had just had a massive hemorrhagic stroke on her 24th birthday. Roz took my hand, looked at me with her good eye, and said, "She'll be fine, send her to Rusk." Were her hearing aids in? "Mom," I yelled, "Claudia's not fine. She's in the neuro ICU at Mount Sinai." I sobbed loudly into her ear. "She may not make it." "You watch, Pussycat. They'll fix her right up at Rusk." In her 20s, Roz had been a secretary at Rusk Institute, strolling up First Avenue in heels to report to the father of rehabilitative medicine, Dr. Howard Rusk himself. Polio was at its peak, and like COVID, people stayed home and feared for their loved ones. Rusk was a place of hope and miracles, where even the most disabled were given a chance to improve. But now, after several bone-shattering falls claimed her independence, Roz was living with me in Kingston, New York. When her caregiver left for the day, we ate dinners of baby lamb chops and buttery little steaks with baked potatoes and sour cream. Then, holding hands, we watched Say Yes to the Dress. My mother often whispered, "I'm happy," as we said no to most of the dresses. Or in her words, "On that took us?" Over the weeks following Claudia's stroke, several brain surgeries stabilized her enough for us to start thinking about rehab. But getting into Rusk had about the same odds as getting into Harvard. Roz thought about who from 1949 she might call to put in a good word, but finding obituaries for all of her possibilities, we gave that up. As it turned out, rehab centers like young stroke survivors, they liven up the place. At Rusk, where Claudia remained for 67 days, winter turned into spring, and she took her first steps and then many more. On the first warm, sunny day, her music therapist led a kazoo concert on the terrace where we tooted "You Are My Sunshine." I stopped crying every day as I saw pleasure seep into the cracks of her life. As Claudia grappled with acceptance, she began to see that life still had forward momentum when I Get Out began to pepper her sentences. A friend's elevator apartment in Chelsea became our headquarters for the next several months. Our daily walks turned into a slow mile. But as Claudia continued to improve, Roz, who had gone to stay at my sister's house, had an awful fall. Dreaming of dress shopping on the Lower East Side, she stepped right out of bed. There was no Rusk for my mother, no chance of getting fixed right up. 90 days of senior rehab got her from bed to wheelchair, and in that wheelchair to her new room in the nursing home unit. And although it was a fine place, Roz was where I had promised never to put her. How could I have known my daughter would need me so much? When Claudia was finally able to take a long drive, we visited Roz at the nursing home. The tip-tap of Claudia's cane as we made our way down the hall reminded me so much of the click-clack of my mother's heels that announced her tired return from work when I was a child. I searched my mother's face for grief as she watched her granddaughter walk slowly through the door, but I saw only pride and the joy of someone whose love was so deep that it did not allow for despair. As Claudia marched forward, Roz, my rock, my indomitable mother, fell behind. She slipped away last November, just shy of her 100th birthday. And although we miss her terribly, her optimism and determination are embedded in us. "We're happy, Mom," I still whisper to her.
Pediatrician and writer Vidya Viswanathan's literary journal began in first grade when she accidentally devoured George Orwell's Animal Farm. That early passion evolved into a career balancing medicine and creativity, nurtured through school newspapers, blogging, and later publishing freelance journalism. Currently practicing medicine in Princeton, her writing is focused on narrative nonfiction and her debut novel. Here to present The Button Battery is Vidya Viswanathan.
When my patients find out that I'm a mom, they assume that because I'm a pediatrician, I don't worry when my kids are sick. That's incorrect. I just have very specific worries. Even before my twins were born, While pregnant friends tracked what size fruit their baby was in the womb, I tracked what neonatal intensive care unit intervention my babies would likely receive if they were born that week. As they grew into toddlers, if they had a fever last a day beyond my liking, I'd be checking for signs of the inflammatory Kawasaki disease at bedtime, counting off clinical criteria in my brain as my husband Nihith counted out loud how many desserts the very hungry caterpillar ate that day. So you can imagine how I felt one day when I found a button battery on the floor of our living room. If you don't work in pediatrics, you might underestimate this small, flat, circular battery. When ingested, it uses the body's moisture to create an electrical current that can rapidly burn a hole through the esophagus and trachea, leading to severe disability or death. If a child has swallowed one, they must be taken to the ER immediately. So one day, back when my kids were toddlers, I opened a new toy that came with a loose replacement button battery in a small bag. I put the bag to the side, meaning to lock it away. I forgot. About an hour later, I saw the empty bag on the ground. I gasped. There was a button battery in that, I told Nihith. I had prepared for this crisis with all my anxious thoughts over the years, and yet, when it arrived, I did not feel prepared at all. We started frantically searching for it. Nihith was changing our son Satya's diaper, and our daughter Leica was the one roaming around, playing near the bag. It had to be her. In desperation, we asked Leica, "Did you swallow the button battery?" "Yes," she nodded sagely. "Yes, I did." I stared, trying to determine, is this toddler improv, where she says, "Yes, and," to any question? Or is she being honest? I asked her a follow-up. "Leica, where's the battery?" She replied, "Under the piano." The piano is a small, bright blue toddler toy. We checked the floor beneath it and found nothing. Leica, oblivious to our stress, returned to playing with a toy car. "Leica, where is it?" I pressed. "Under the piano," she insisted. Should we go to the ER or keep searching? Nihith seemed calmer, lacking the button battery fatal connection that was branded into my brain. But as the physician parent, if I said we go to the ER, he'd drive us. I was about to say, "Let's go," but I saw Leica return to the piano toy. She was holding stickers and shoving them between the piano keys, pushing them deep down so they flattened behind the keys, so that they were under the piano. I felt my brain enter hers like I was Professor X with hair. To her, under the piano meant behind the keys, and putting things behind the keys was a valid activity. To her, a button battery was just another toy, not poison. But the pediatrician in me screamed, "You're losing time." The thought of the battery burning through Leica's esophagus was paralyzing. But I turned on my phone's flashlight. I shone light into the tiny spaces between the keys. Was that something shiny? I shook the piano, but nothing came out. We had to take it apart. My engineer husband grabbed a screwdriver and removed the top and sides of the piano in record speed. Holding my breath, I took out some keys, and we tilted the piano. Satya and Leica watched, curious why we were gutting one of their toys. Sliding out from behind the keys came an innocuous, silver, shiny, round thing. A death trap, there in the safest place all along, under the piano.
A frequent contributor to Writers Read, Anne Levin is a widely published writer and book reviewer who enjoyed a long journalistic career at the Associated Press, covering elections and global disasters. Originally from Pennsylvania, her travels took her from Smith College to Texas for creative writing before she settled in New York's Upper East Side. Her work appears in many magazines and literary journals, and she joins us now to present 3 ways of looking at a diagnosis. Please welcome Anne Levin.
Even now, 50 years later, I still cringe when I see the track marks on my arms. It happened to me just the other day when I was walking to the park, glanced down, and caught a glimpse of bleached skin and tiny white scars arrayed atop the faint blue river of a vein. Then a bird soared overhead, and suddenly I remembered the Wallace Stevens poem, 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird. Fine, I thought. I can think of 3 ways, at least, to look at my diagnosis of hepatitis C, which I got along with the tracks from doing IV drugs in college. First, there was my way, remorse. After I was diagnosed in 2000, I kept it a secret from everyone but my family. I was so ashamed that I spent that period of my life hanging out with junkies instead of taking a junior year abroad in Paris. But over the 2 years and 3 months I spent trying to eradicate the virus, I met plenty of people who had no regrets at all. Lillian, for instance, who couldn't have been more different than me. I met her in a support group at Mount Sinai not long after I found out. She had the careless glamour of a 70s-era rock star, like Bonnie Raitt or Emmylou Harris. Tall and lanky, with whitish blonde hair and unblinking blue-gray eyes, she was on a first-name basis with the 6 best hepatologists in town. I wondered where she got the confidence when I cowered before them, intimidated by their white coats, mortified by the fact that they'd gone to medical school when I was sticking dirty needles in my veins. Lillian said the 2 years she spent shooting heroin was the best time of her life, but she knew it was unsustainable, so she quit. She turned her diagnosis into a crusade, organizing busloads of people to go to Albany and Washington to raise awareness of the disease and push for cheaper, better drugs. She never lost her zeal for advocacy work, even though she had to try 8 different therapies over 18 years and was on a waiting list for a liver transplant before the meds finally worked. Then there was the ad man, who was in the hospital bed beside me after we'd both gotten our liver biopsies. I never found out his name, just that he graduated from Wharton and had a flashy job in advertising. He was about my age, good-looking in a preppy sort of way, with dark hair parted on the side and bronze skin suggesting he either had parents who lived in Florida or patronized tanning salons. I asked him if he felt any stigma about the diagnosis. Nah, he said, his eyes glued to the TV on the wall. That was party time, man. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. When I told him that the side effects of interferon and ribavirin, then the gold standard of treatment, sounded scary and the odds of it working were crap, he tilted his head towards me. We weren't supposed to move our abdomens, and said, "Que sera, sera." Then he went back to watching TV. I, on the other hand, was freaking out about all the possible adverse reactions to the treatment. It seemed barbaric, like the icicles that filled the long window in Stephen's beautiful poem, though eventually it worked. Every now and then, though, I do wonder if people would even notice the tracks anymore. It would be hard to distinguish them from all the other ravages of time. The age spots, the keratoses, the mysterious red scratches that look like I slept in a blackberry patch overnight, and the warty brown bumps. It was a far cry from the dewy skin of a hot college co-ed. So maybe there was a 4th way to look at this diagnosis. At this point, who really cares?
Until finding a good therapist, Barbara Wharton's identity was shaped by chaotic Sunday dinners with her massive Italian-American family in Brooklyn. Writing became the only way to be heard over 40 relatives talking at once. By day, Barbara wrote for corporate bigwigs. By night, she penned poems, plays, and memoirs. Exploring her family's dynamics and differentness, she now joins us to present her story, Immune Systems. Please welcome Barbara Wharton.
Medical researchers love disease clusters. My Italian-American family are one. Among my mother and her 10 siblings and their roughly two dozen children, there have been multiple cases of Cooley's anemia, rheumatoid arthritis, systemic lupus erythematosus, and a whole host of other autoimmune diseases. There was little known about all of these diseases in the early 1960s. I was about 14 when one of my uncles ended up in Columbia Presbyterian, severely ill, and was eventually diagnosed with lupus. He told the rheumatologist that one of his sisters also had lupus and suffered with Cooley's anemia. My aunt was diagnosed when blood tests for her marriage license returned a false positive for syphilis. That's a common red flag for lupus. Then my uncle's doctor started asking him about his sister and his family history, and he told him about an RA lupus research project he was working on. Would your parents, brothers, and sisters and their children, he asked, be willing to come in and participate in the research? Everyone in the family said yes. We would schlep gladly into the city if it meant that we would give a little help. I was excited. Yippee! A science experiment and a trip to New York City. Well, at least to a parking garage and a hospital diagnostic lab. I didn't care how scared I was to have some doctor stick a needle in my arm to draw blood. I was going to New York City. We set a date and a time. We all showed up, encamped in the hospital waiting room. Suddenly, it was a party room. About 30 of us drinking sodas and coffee and talking about this and that and our fear of needles and bad veins at a volume only Neapolitans can reach without even trying. One by one, our names were called, and we each marched into the doctor's cubicles and rolled up our sleeves, sat for interviews about medical symptoms and histories, signed paperwork, and learned that our blood would be used immediately and some of it frozen for ongoing study. And when it was over, of course we went out for Italian food. One of my uncles knew a guy who knew a place that could fit all of us for dinner. We ate. We compared the restaurant's meatballs to my grandmother's meatballs, the gold standard against which all meatballs were measured. We talked about suspicious rashes, aches and pains we were all afraid to tell anyone about, bone aching, weariness, swelling, and lupus symptoms, treatments, and their side effects. Dessert came, and between the crunching of our cannolis, an uncle asked the assembled group, "Did the doctor tell you?" Everybody stopped chewing, and mouths full chimed, "What?" That uncle nodded and cracked a crooked grin. The doctor told me that our family was the largest family cohort to participate in their research. Pride. Not sadness that we were bound by potentially deadly diseases buzzed around the restaurant. Even the kids were smiling crooked, ironic grins. If we were wearing suspenders, we probably would have snapped them. We mattered. We were more than poor immigrants who ate foods with names so-called real Americans couldn't pronounce. And they said the cheese we ate smelled like toe jam, who told us we must be in the mafia or unhinged because we talked with our hands. We were medical celebrities. Epilogue: since the mid-1950s, aunts, uncles, and cousins have died from lupus and related autoimmune diseases. Many still suffer with these diseases. In 2004, another uncle was dying, and I called that doctor I had met at Columbia Presbyterian when I was 14 for advice. He told me researchers were still using and gaining insights from the blood donated by my family. Some solace, some hope for the future.
Lynn Edelson divides her time between writing memoir and short stories. Her essays have been featured in New York City's Listen to Your Mother show and various anthologies, and recently she was a finalist for the Eunice Williams Nonfiction Prize. Living in Brewster with her husband and a dog that she says sheds far too much, she still laments that neither of their grown sons are likely to buy her a beach house. Here to share her story in the company of women, this is Lynn Edelson.
By the third infusion, the chemo had begun to wear me down. A heavy-set Hasidic woman sat next to me on the long green sofa, both of us with IVs in our arms, connected to long poles holding the bags of medication. She quietly chatted in Yiddish with her friend from the yeshiva enclave upstate, who sat in a chair nearby. We had all sat across from each other for 2 full days of chemo during the previous month, and at the office visits in between treatments, never speaking. We would smile, we would nod, but say nothing. Not how are you feeling, not we're almost done, nothing. That afternoon, I leaned against my husband and finally put my head into his lap to sleep. My down coat lay in the small space on the couch between the woman and I as I huddled to make myself smaller. I felt her reach over and cover me with my coat and rub my back gently. I thought of my mother, who had died 5 years earlier, and how she had caressed my forehead when I was ill, and I wept silently, grateful for this woman's touch. When the 3 months of chemo were finally done, the visits to the office were not. Those appointments were different, as no infusion patients were scheduled. We waited for blood work and a physical, while new women nervously waited for their turn to speak with our oncologist to learn their fate. The Hasidic woman and I were now veterans, and we smiled knowingly to one another when an unfamiliar woman walked in. Her beautiful hair will be gone, we said to no one. Her beautiful eyes will tire. Her beautiful smile will fade. We simply looked at each other and nodded. During one of my final post-chemo visits, a short, round, Orthodox Jewish woman with chin-length dark hair sat on a wooden stool. She smiled at all of us in the crowded waiting room, clearly eager to chat, having recently just been diagnosed with breast cancer. "Is this your first time seeing the doctor?" I asked her. "Yes, I've heard wonderful things about him," she replied, grateful to be speaking with one of us. She didn't know that she'd be waiting more than 2 hours before she even set foot inside of an exam room, and no one had the heart to tell her. And she had not yet been introduced to the office manager, the woman who shouted at patients regularly, demanding they pay their bills. "How did you find out about him?" I asked. "Oh, my daughter-in-law found him for me," she said. "She's outside looking for a parking spot." I said, "Wow, a daughter-in-law who drove you in?" Lucky you, I said as I smiled at her beaming face. Oh, I am lucky. So very lucky, she said. Well, we all looked at each other. This woman had just been diagnosed with breast cancer and was about to spend the next 3 months rigorously fighting it with a bald head, days of vomiting and exhaustion, and considered herself lucky. Really? Why is that? I said. My daughter-in-law is the most wonderful person in the world. She's kind and smart and a wonderful mother. I am truly blessed. No one said a word. I looked at my husband, the only man in the room, and finally said, "You know, I'll bet your mother never says that about me." And in that one moment, everything changed. The large Hasidic woman who had covered me with my coat laughed out loud, tears streaming down her face. A small, serious woman who I had never seen smile looked at her sister and chuckled. 2 other women could not stop laughing as they looked at me and grinned. Another put her hand over her mouth as she convulsed with laughter. The room was filled with mirth and good cheer, and we all smiled and nodded at each other as it slowly quieted. And finally, I understood. We had been speaking to each other all along. I'm still here. Dr. Danielle Ofri is a primary care internist at Bellevue Hospital, clinical professor of medicine at NYU, and editor-in-chief of Bellevue Literary Review. Her writing appears in outlets like The New Yorker, The New York Times, The Lancet, The Atlantic, CNN, and National Public Radio. Her contribution to this very special event is a powerful piece called The Raw Fear of Being a Patient. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Danielle Ofri.
When my son was 18 months old, his doctor recommended he get tubes in his ears. He had recurrent ear infections that might affect language development. As a physician myself, I dug into the medical research, and it seemed that tubes might help, but, all kids catch up anyway. In the end, I made my decision as a parent, not as a doctor. I wanted my kid to have the best opportunities, and besides, it was a low-risk procedure. Everything will be okay, I was told. 2 weeks later, I scooped up a sleeping toddler before dawn and hailed a taxi on the darkened city streets. In the hospital, the OR was uncannily cheerful. The nurses sang songs. The surgeon had elephants on his hat. I wiggled a hose of anesthetic in front of my now squirming son, which did nothing for 10 long minutes. Just when I thought this technique would never succeed, my son slackened ever so slightly, and at that moment, the OR clicked into action. The cheery demeanor dissolved, and the patient was whisked from my arms. In less than 3 seconds, he was strapped on the table with a mask over his face, utterly still, and I mean unhumanly still. At that moment, my faith in science plummeted. My decades of medical training, my PhD in biochemistry, my grounding in the scientific method, it all evaporated. The sight of my son's body, deathly rigid on the OR table, completely unhinged my confidence that everything will be okay. I was not sure that anything would be okay. My little baby, 23 pounds, including race car pajamas, seemed minuscule under 5 lumbering adults and gargantuan steel equipment. And there was nothing I could do to help him. An orderly led me out of the OR, and I suddenly clenched onto his arm. "Please," I beseeched him, "please make sure my son is okay." "It'll all be fine," he reassured me, even though he had no role at all in the surgery. But he was wearing scrubs, so he was somehow part of this medical complex that had swallowed up my little son. I paced the waiting room, the knot in my gut twisting. Adverse outcomes were rare. I knew that. But I also knew from my medical experience that when a procedure is performed frequently enough, those rare occurrences, they occur. And so, when the surgeon reappeared without my son in tow, my heart stuttered to a standstill. I steeled myself. "It's all done," he said, kicking back a slug of coffee. It took some time for the reality of his words to sink in. Even when a sleepy, tousled boy was placed in my arms, the panicky choke of fear still gripped me. I've always been a rational person, confident in the power of facts. Knowledge armed me against the existential fears of the universe. And yet, faced with a minor surgical procedure, my armor crumpled like dust. Parents make a frightening bargain of uncertainty when they entrust their children to the medical system. It's like those classic psychology experiments with the plexiglass bridge over the sheer drop. The medical system beckons. It's safe. We'll guide your child across the glass bridge, but your eyes and your emotions, they see only the abyss. And it dawned on me that I ask my own patients every single day to step over this void, reinforced only by my beckoning assurances. My son recovered rapidly. He was into trouble before lunchtime, but my emotional vulnerability lasted far longer. I'm still an empiricist, but I now appreciate how quickly this rational protection can dissolve. And so, when I sit with my patients now, I still lay out the risks and benefits in a logical manner. But I also try to acknowledge the raw fear that data cannot assuage. We can't eliminate this necessary leap of faith that medical care ultimately requires. But we can at least recognize the stomach plummeting sensation that occurs whenever a patient edges their toes over that invisible glass bridge. Thank you. Jane Whitmer is a seasoned executive creative director who has written and art-directed campaigns for global brands like Dove, Burt's Bees, and L'Oreal. Known for her fearless banter and sharp observations, she's a champion media consumer with opinions on everything. Jane lives on the Upper West Side and frequently visits her daughter in London. She closes Act 1 of our show with the big whoops. Please welcome Jane Whitmer.
Regurgitating, hurling, ralphing, heaving, vomiting. During my idyllic childhood, I knew it as whoopsing. My beautiful mother's face would furrow with concern when if I told her my stomach hurt, she'd softly ask, "Oh, honey, do you have to whoops?" This was my first onomatopoeia, and somehow that word always made me feel a little better. It came up recently, so to speak, on a mother-daughter bonding trip through Portugal. On our last night, my lovely daughter Olivia and I dined at a jaw-dropping cliffside restaurant overlooking the Atlantic in a small whitewashed village. We were celebrating her 25th birthday, and once the gregarious chef knew this, he decided to serve us everything on the menu. Red and white wines flowed with a medley of salted cod, custard tarts, grilled sardines, soft ripened cheeses, rich seafood stew, and the Portuguese delicacy that I think I may still be digesting called barnacles, which resembled claw-like rubber toes. It was a magical night. After singing a full-voiced happy birthday with the rest of the diners, we put our overstuffed, tipsy selves into an Uber to get back down the coast to our hotel. Our driver took on the dark, curvy coastal road as if part of a car chase in a Ridley Scott blockbuster, resulting in every large and small organ in our bodies being tossed left and right, salad spinner style. My stomach churned, My face turned slightly green as we tried to slow the driver down with very broken Portuguese. Early the next morning, I was feeling a whole new level of nauseous, yet was armed with a crisp paper goodie bag filled with a bottle of water, yogurt, and an apple kindly supplied by the concierge. Since the slightest motion of a car felt like riding the cyclone at Coney Island, I closed my eyes tight all the way to the airport, deeply breathing. Tackling the maze of lines was challenging as Olivia sweetly over-explained my slow pace to impatient travelers. Sweating, weak, and thinking about how I may die in a customs line in Lisbon, I begged Olivia to find a wheelchair. "What do you want me to do, steal one from someone's grandmother?" she questioned in a panic. I slumped on the floor and proudly half-smiled when my resourceful offspring procured some wheels. And then it happened. Olivia was Mario Karting me through the crowds to get to our gate when I unleashed a torrent that seemed to be coming up from my toes, projecting right into the open goodie bag on my lap, keeping the yogurt, apple, and bottle of water disturbingly afloat. And it didn't stop. With a force that could have power washed the side of a house, I was whoopsing in a way that would make my mother shudder. Travelers dove out of the line of fire as we parted the crowds. We slammed into the restroom without a minute to spare. The bag was full. "Clear the way!" Olivia screeched as she poured me over the porcelain. Then, feeling only slightly better, I was wheeled to our gate by Nurse Olivia, who bottle-fed me water. "Oh, I see you're not seated together," the cheerful check-in attendant said. "Let me try to put you two next to each other." "Oh, no, that's really okay. That's really okay. Don't go to the trouble," said Olivia. A little too quickly. Clearly, playing nurse had run its course, and I did think about what my fate may be as an elderly parent. For the next 7 hours, I curled into the cramped middle seat, head steady, pinching my nose against the aroma of chicken or fish. With my eyes closed and Olivia 5 rows behind me, I thought about our amazing journey together. I thought about my mother's comforting presence. And I thought that even when we're not at our best, and even when our defined roles are tossed around, we should all feel and cherish the power of unconditional love, from mothers and from daughters.
This afternoon is all about the power of narrative, specifically how our personal health and medical stories help us navigate the complexities of being human. If the stories you're hearing today resonate with you, you can take a piece of this experience home. During the reception following the show, copies of the Bellevue Literary Review will be available for purchase. And as we have been talking about, BLR is the true pioneer in this space, publishing high-quality fiction, nonfiction, and poetry that explores the world of health and healing. And each copy you buy today directly supports their incredible work and the writers who share their vital perspectives. Writers Read also gives voice to the kinds of stories that bind us and emphasize our shared humanity. And I'm proud of the work our small volunteer team does and proud of the body of work we present on this stage and in our podcast and in our newest anthology called Body Language, which features all the fine stories you're hearing on the stage as well as 24 more. One of the, it is such an embarrassment of riches. We had 144 submissions for this show. And we should be presenting 12. The producer and me always wants to squeeze in a little more. How much can we ask you to sit through? But it pains me so much to have to pass on good work because we simply can't present it all. But we can present it all in this book, and there are 36 stories here that are quite wonderful, and they also support our mission to create performance opportunities and promote writers. It too will be available at the reception, along with this beautiful hardcover anthology, Well Said, Well Read, which collects my favorite stories from our first 10 years. We started this in 2014. There are 62 stories in here. They're all 2 pages, which I think makes it the perfect bedside companion. You don't want to be looking at your device with the annoying sleep-interrupting blue light. And if you resist the urge to consume this like a bag of chips and read one per night, aloud, preferably, you've got 2 months of bedtime stories. So consider that. And we brought enough for everyone to take home 6. So please think about that. Obviously, I guess I want to say, I sincerely hope you enjoy this and you take some books home and tell some folks about what we're doing here. We're going to pause now for 15 minutes for a brief leg stretch. And when you hear this bell, which, by the way, is the bell I grew up with. This was what my mother called us to dinner with. I'm the youngest of 6. And if she had to ring this twice, it was not going to be good. So I'm just saying, come back to your seats for a great second half. I'm Ed McCann. This is Writers Read. Thank you. Thank you very much. You're too kind. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Welcome back to the second half of Body Language here at City Winery in Manhattan. This is Writers Read's special collaboration with Bellevue Literary Review, celebrating a publishing history of 25 years. And before we bring up the next writer, I want to extend a very special thank you to Suzanne McConnell, one of Bellevue Literary Review's longtime editors, who is actually the godmother of this collaboration. She's the author of Pity the Reader, On Writing with Style, which is a book of Kurt Vonnegut's writing advice that blends Vonnegut's own aphorisms, essays, and letters with Suzanne's memoir of him as a teacher and a friend during her time at the Iowa Writers' Workshop. She's also the author of the forthcoming story collection, If You Think Your Heart Can Take It. And Suzanne, I'd ask you to please stand, but we're dark. Can anyone see? There she is. She's standing. There's Suzanne McConnell. Thank you, Suzanne, very much. And thanks, too, to our marketing committee co-chairs, Allison Gragnano and Deborah Freed, to our senior editor, Stephen Lewis, Writers Board President Sarah Marone, executive producer Richard Kolath, who you all met at the door. He's that very handsome man who gave you your program. Our data analyst and operations specialist, Carol Wood, and most especially to our production director, Kevin O'Connor. There he is. Our audio engineer, Noah Myers, at the board. And our excellent production interns from SUNY New Paltz, Hayden Norcia and Sofia Gonzalez. They all deserve a round of applause, and here it is. Poet and essayist Elizabeth Bayou Grace opens Act 2 of our show. Living in Massachusetts, she believes deeply in art's power, and she is a proud aunt to 17 very special humans. Elizabeth holds an MFA and has performed her work at venues ranging from Texas dive bars to City Winery here in New York. She is the co-author with her dad, Stephen Lewis, of the collection Fire in Paradise. Her Substack is called Poetry is Politics, and she is at work on a memoir. Her contribution now is a story she calls The Screws. Please give a warm welcome to Elizabeth Bayou Grace.
There were 16 of them, which was one more than I was expecting when I was handed a clear plastic deli container labeled with a piece of masking tape in the pathology lab of the Beth Israel Hospital for Joint Diseases. 1 week earlier, I had undergone a hardware removal surgery. It was the last day of my last spring break. The next day, I would be heading back to finish my senior year at Warren Wilson College. I'd spent the last 4 years reading and writing poetry, attending full moon keggers and cow pastures, and having a series of hip reconstruction surgeries. The procedures involved breaking and reshaping the acetabulum, the sockets that cup the femurs. Typically, it's a 3-screw surgery for a grand total of 6 shiny pieces of titanium for the average bilateral hip dysplasia patient. Eager to add another trophy to my millennial altar, after 2 reconstructions, I left with the most hardware my surgeon had ever used. So many that he admittedly lost count. 14, he presumed. 15, we counted on the x-rays. Though the hospital was a 2-hour drive from my parents' house upstate, where I had spent the last week hobbling around on crutches, nervous about my new, no hardware Swiss cheese pelvis, I was intent on retrieving the screws. I had earned them. I no longer needed the metal pieces to hold me together physically, but I wasn't ready to let them go, especially not into some anonymous garbage fire. Unfortunately, sometime between filling out the paperwork for the post-surgical retrieval of the screws, the actual procedure, and then the week I spent recovering in the company of boomers instead of my besties in Barbados, the paperwork had been lost, which is how I ended up in the pathology lab. A yellow-white room no patient is ever meant to see, hot tears on my face, yelling over the whir of platelet machines, and a bunch of very nervous techs, "You lost my screws!" Luckily, they had not. The screws, in fact, had not yet been processed. After a few moments of scramble and panic, an angel in full PPE found my beloved steel bits on a shelf with other clear plastic deli containers full of medical waste. They were unwashed. I proudly took them home. I marveled holding the screws in my hand. They were covered in pieces of me, blood and bone dust, but otherwise, they looked exactly like the kind I might pick up from Ace Hardware. They ranged in size from 1/2 inch to one particularly blood-crusted long boy clocking in at 3 inches. I wondered if that was the angular hard head I used to be able to feel just under the skin when I pressed along the left scar. From there, I started to give them away. One to the boy that I fell in love with when he had visited me bedside in the hospital mid-blood transfusion. One to the childhood friend who I met when I still wore a brace that went from my ribs to my thighs. One to the friend who let me tattoo my name onto his rib cage. One to my college roommate who had quilted me a blanket, and another to a woman who had made me herbal tinctures for recovery. One to a one-night stand who described my limp as swagger. One to someone who didn't understand what the gift meant. I kept the rest. Then I lost a few. I wrapped 3 in red embroidery floss and made a mobile that swung from the fan of my studio apartment in a pink house. I lost some more. I still keep one. 15 years later, never cleaned, and now rusted with my own blood in a jar in my writing desk drawer. When it comes time, bury me with it. I earned it.
Ellen Warsaw finds her greatest fulfillment in motherhood. A Cornell graduate who studied biology and education, she later homeschooled her children. Living with type 1 diabetes and major depressive disorder, Ellen uses journalism as a vital tool for managing her health. A prize-winning essayist currently working on a memoir, she traveled from her Maryland home to present her story, Flick. Please welcome Ellen Warsaw.
Skin to skin, bare thigh to bare thigh, there we sat and sat. My small suntanned leg next to Mom's larger pale one. We wore shorts for easy access to our legs. My shaky hand wrapped in hers, sure and steady. I could feel each bump beneath me on my parents' white chenille bedspread. My bare feet dangled over the edge. Mom's sneakers rested firmly on the floor. Mom guided my right hand in the air as we practiced the injection again and again with an empty syringe. We counted together, 1, 2, 3, flick. With the emphasis on flick, my mother's hand over mine demonstrated the quick jab that would drive the 1/2-inch needle into my skin. It isn't like throwing a dart. She gestured the small flick. My frustration grew with every failed attempt. my hand holding the syringe with a death grip and utterly unable to move in the air. The syringe normally carried the insulin on which my life with type 1 diabetes depended. I believe you can do it. Mom's hand was no longer flicking. She was gently rubbing my back. My hand shakily poised again, a fraction of an inch above my thigh, and we counted in unison. 1, 2, 3. Only my mother said, "Flick." My voice dropped away, and my hand stayed in the same place it had started, quivering above my flesh, pinched tightly between my left fingers and thumb. It wasn't just that my existence depended on the insulin. My independence and social life depended on my ability to inject myself when needed. Staying for breakfast at sleepovers when I needed my morning shot, sitting in the Red Wings baseball stadium with a friend's family, munching popcorn, or at the amusement park until long after dinner when my second injection of the day was due. Those experiences felt vital while I quickly approached my tween years. There was so much on which my life depended: a ready source of glucose if my blood sugar fell too low, eating the right types of foods at the right times, avoiding birthday cupcakes and Halloween candy, giving my shot. What I needed was more independence, giving my shot. We had started as recommended with a grapefruit. I quickly succeeded at flicking the needle through the thick yellow peel without any countdown. After I repeatedly guided the needle through the pockmarked fruit surface, Mom and I both imagined it would be so much easier to pierce my tender skin. Yet still I sat, with my hand hovering above my leg, needle poised. My mother glanced down. "I want you to give me the shot." At first I thought I had misunderstood. "You want me to do what?" Perhaps she didn't realize how many times she'd be poked by those needles. 1, 2, 3, flick. With each successful injection I gave her, my mom's experience and expression never wavered. No wince or grimace. She patted my back and praised my success. At the end of the summer, still unsuccessful at injecting myself, I attended a sleepaway camp for diabetic kids. Dozens of kids who knew what my life was like. At the line in the infirmary the first day, the nurse asked each one of us, holding a syringe, "You or me?" We all understood, and I was too embarrassed not to try. "Me," was my frail reply. Long after the other campers had all left for dinner, I still sat, syringe in hand. Eventually, an ultimatum was given: I inject or hand over the syringe. I spoke aloud. 1, 2, 3, flick. As my wrist moved ever so slightly, the needle went in. I felt I'd grown an inch and aged a year with my accomplishment. We were required to write postcards home during rest hour. My first was all gratitude and pride. "You were right, Mom. I did it. Thank your thigh."
Rihanna Murray is an award-winning writer and editor whose work has been published in The Atlantic, The New York Times, and elsewhere. Currently, she is the essays editor for Newsweek, and she spent the previous decade of her career at The Today Show. She's the recipient of multiple Society for Features Journalism Awards and holds an MFA in creative writing from Stony Brook University. Rihanna grew up in South Carolina, called New York City home for many years, and now lives with her family in Kingston, New York. Her contribution to our body language event is entitled Employer-Sponsored Health Insurance. For her first trip to the Writers Read stage, please welcome Rihanna Murray.
"You tested positive," the doctor said over the phone. It wasn't a cancer diagnosis. It was a "you're going to get cancer" diagnosis. I had the BRCA1 gene mutation, BRCA being an acronym for breast cancer, which meant that, barring a miracle, I would eventually get breast cancer, maybe ovarian cancer, possibly melanoma, perhaps pancreatic cancer, and a handful of others I stopped listening to after the first gut punch. The specialist's recommendations were clear and urgent. Removal of all the parts of me that made me, biologically at least, a woman. The parts that grew and housed my babies, and the parts that later nourished them. Barbaric amputations, made no less barbaric by the sheer number of women who have endured them. Months of recovery, surgical menopause at 38 years old. Or, as they reminded me, the alternative, cancer. Less than 24 hours earlier, I'd been on another call. "It's a business decision, not personal," my boss said, a 20-something HR person I'd never met before, hovering in the background on Microsoft Teams, third-wheeling my layoff meeting. My eyes were puffy, my face red, tears sliding down my makeup-less cheeks. I had never felt so unprofessional, so naked and exposed in a work meeting. I'd lost my job at a major news network, my professional home of a decade. My family was losing a lot: our livelihood, our health insurance. 3 months earlier, I'd been in another meeting, this time with my therapist. I'd told her about these 2 potential hurricanes, which then felt like unlikely, far-off possibilities, explaining to her that I can handle if one happens, but not both. But that won't happen, right? I fired her before landfall because I thought the storms were turning and I was in the clear. It was a miscalculation. I sign up for COBRA. I pour myself into research. How much time can I be away from work before we miss a mortgage payment? How much does a double mastectomy cost? How long will I be unable to raise my arms? At what age do babies stop needing to be picked up? I look for a job with health insurance. I make a plan to remove parts piecemeal. Fallopian tubes now, ovaries later, breasts, who knows? The doctors all say the same thing. At least you don't need them anymore. A reference to my children. Look at all you have. You're one of the lucky ones. But there's something they don't seem to understand as they tick off the body parts that will need to be surgically extracted. How many pieces of me can you take away until I am no longer me? In the breast surgeon's office, the pink makes me want to vomit. I feel like I'm in an October PSA, surrounded by cringeworthy signs plucked from Hobby Lobby. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Giving up is not an option. I feel like a cliche. I remove my shirt, and the doctor stares at my naked breasts, then tells me what's wrong with them, as if I didn't already know, as if I'd had a choice. But now I do, which is a disorienting fact to reckon with. I came of age in the 1990s and early 2000s, a time of heroin chic and Britney Spears being called fat. It took so much reprogramming to find peace with my own body. Now, this doctor threatens to undo all my hard work. She tugs at a thread, and the whole sweater falls apart. She mimes where she would slice my breasts off, like we're talking about cold cuts. "You could go bigger," she says cheerfully, eager to break out the book I imagine she has, like a JCPenney catalog, but for implants. She offers this possibility to me like it's a silver lining, something to be thankful for. It's not. But at least for now, it's not cancer either.
Alicia Winter has navigated diverse careers, from crafting log furniture in Colorado to training elite dressage horses. Whether baking at off-the-grid ski resorts or teaching composting, she embraces every pursuit with passion. A post-middle-aged writer, she was a 2023 Bread Loaf contributor. Alicia, who has two grown children, lives in Connecticut with her husband and 2 poodle pointer dogs. In her story, The Finger, a quiet soccer game quickly becomes any mother's worst nightmare. Please welcome writer Alicia Winter.
I was sitting in a camp chair watching a soccer game when my 11-year-old son came up behind me and whispered in my ear, "Mom, I cut off my finger." I knew right away it was true. He would never say cut off if he meant sliced or gashed. His left hand was clutched in his right, and blood seeped out between the fingers. I leapt up with him and ran to the parking lot, located the missing digit, and realized I needed to call 911. But I'd left my phone back in the camp chair. Instead of running all the way back, I embarrassed us both by hollering across the field. "Someone call 911, he cut off his finger," which resulted in 14 calls to dispatch about the same event. Then, with the tiny pink nail turning blue in my palm, I remembered the rest of my son and got out the first aid kit. His finger wasn't bleeding anymore. In fact, there was very little to see, just some cartilage where the joint ended. I didn't want to put the severed finger down for fear I might lose it, but I managed to find a gauze pad, tear it open with my teeth, and wrap it around the stump. He began to cry. He told me he'd been whittling with a pocket knife, with my pocket knife, the knife I gave him permission to use. What was I thinking? What kind of mother was I? Recrimination flooded me. Someone brought a bag of ice, and I wrapped the fingertip in gauze too, placed it on the ice, and tried not to cry myself. We sat on the bumper and waited for the ambulance. At the hospital, they told us they didn't have a hand specialist, so we waited. They told us we'd be moved to Yale, then to Hartford, then to Westchester, so we waited. 16 hours later, we were transferred, where we waited. Finally, almost a day after the accident, they assembled a surgical team, took the finger, and wheeled my son away. And I waited, hoping they could fix this horrible mistake I'd made and make my son whole again. The reattachment procedure was unsuccessful. There are 3 arteries in the tip of a finger. 2 were reattached, but the 3rd stubbornly refused to stick. When it comes to fingers, 2 out of 3 doesn't cut it. "Too bad we didn't see you sooner," the doctor said, as if that were our fault. He offered us either amputation surgery, where they cut the finger back even more and stitched the skin over the end, or an experimental treatment involving mystery gel that could, get this, regrow the finger. We could probably get another centimeter out of it, the doctor said, but there's nothing we can do about the nail. Maybe draw it on? We chose amputation. As the doctor turned away, I asked, "Can I at least keep the finger?" "Oh, that's just biotrash," she said. "That got thrown out." And the doors closed behind him. I did let myself cry then, alone in that hospital room. My only job was to keep my son healthy and whole, and I had failed. I lost a piece of him on my watch. I was devastated. My son doesn't mind having only 9.5 fingers, but for a long time, I was ashamed about that missing piece. Over the years, as I witnessed other people's mishaps and tragedies, never their mother's fault, I've come to realize that a missing finger is a small price to pay for an otherwise healthy son. He's 26 now, but for some reason, I still regret I didn't insist on reclaiming that tiny piece of finger. It was part of his body, which was once part of my body. And as gruesome as it sounds, I want it back.
Unfortunately, writer Tori Malcangio could not be with us on our rescheduled date, and we certainly miss her. Margie Smith Holt is an Emmy-winning journalist who traded Philadelphia for New York after a career that included waitressing in the Virgin Islands and sailing across the Atlantic. The author of the memoir, Not on Any Map, she also mentors cancer patients through the Visible Ink program at Sloan Kettering. Margie lives with her husband on the Upper West Side, where she runs her writing business. Here now to present Fish Gotta Swim is Margie Smith Holt.
Things started going to hell when a doctor in the U.S. Virgin Islands told me I was turning into a fish. Technically, he said something like, that lump in your neck might be a branchial cleft cyst, which is essentially residual gill-like tissue left over from the embryonic days before your lungs were fully formed. But I stopped listening after gill. 3 years after trading in my real job in Philadelphia for a sailing adventure in the Caribbean, was my body finally morphing into something saltwater-based, like a mermaid? What a great ending for my book. Alas, the doctor was wrong. Turns out it was just cancer. Not the kind that kills you, at least not 70 to 95% of the time, just the kind that makes you sick for a while and landlocks you, ruining your plans to work on a yacht and travel to exotic locales. This, by the way, is how you find out. The chairman of the ENT department at a prestigious East Coast teaching hospital looks at your neck for 90 seconds. A couple of residents stick your lump with a whole bunch of needles. Then the top dog comes back in and announces, cheerfully, "Good news, it looks like lymphoma." This is a little confusing because your surgeon friend, Dr. Lisa, told you good news would be a reactive lymph node, which sounds kind of the same, but isn't exactly what you think you just heard from this specialist guy who has now launched into a hazy and disturbing string of words that includes surgery, chemo, radiation, and not a death sentence. Makes you glad you didn't get the bad news, a friend would later remark. Because no one ever said the word cancer, I was still confused when I dialed Dr. Lisa, who, in her take charge voice, confirmed what I thought I heard, assured me that what I had was treatable, and agreed that perhaps good news was not the best way to describe my diagnosis. "Do not go home and Google anything," she ordered. "Go shoe shopping. I'll call you later." The next day at lunch, my dining companion asked if I read about Smith Magazine's 6-word memoir contest. The winner, not quite what I was planning, could have applied to me, but we want something original. We settle on, "Bring it on, baby. What's next?" I left laughing, but walking home in my new high-heeled black leather boots, dark thoughts followed. Not quite what I was planning? How about, how fucked up is this? I don't need 6 words. This sucks. 2 words suffice. Not fair. I am quite the wordsmith. Is this what people mean when they say, "This will give you plenty to write about"? My old material was better. Chemotherapy will make you sterile, the radiation expert says at our first appointment. Do you want information on egg harvesting? I had been joking that I needed to find a boyfriend before my hair fell out. Now, apparently, I had a week to secure a sperm donor. I was 42 years old. My emergency contact was my mom. And now I had to revisit the baby thing. Did anybody believe this was a good time to undergo the hormone therapy needed to boost egg production? The first meltdown was thorough. Pour a glass of wine, my island friend Celia demanded, her voice crackling over the phone 1,500 miles away. All I have is the bottle of Patron I bought for my friend's tequila party tonight, I cried. Open it. I broke the green seal, uncorked the bottle, and filled a shot glass to the brim. We toasted. I'd rather be patronal than hormonal. 6 words. It seemed responsible, keeping up my tolerance while on land. The oncologist had been impressed when I told him I could hold my lunch in 20-foot seas. He said if I could get drunk without puking, I probably wouldn't get sick from chemo. Finally, some actual good news. If only he could explain why, on so-called solid ground, I felt like I was sinking.
Brooklyn-based writer Hunter Klein is a writer, producer, improviser whose past lives include Little League umpire and, quote, hopelessly romantic New York Jets fan. After realizing his economics degree taught him nothing about economics, he pivoted to his true passions, which are teaching and comedy. A veteran of the Upright Citizens Brigade and the People's Improv Theater, Hunter's musical fiction podcast, The Story of Heidelberg, earned him a Silver Award at the National Audio Theater Festival. Hunter writes about a very specific type of illness with his story, which many in this room have probably experienced as well. And the story is entitled, It's the Hope. I'm pleased to introduce you to writer Hunter Klein.
There are days that are better than others, but they're rare. A spark, a glimpse, a smile, curling up cautiously, as if to know that every centimeter heightens the fall. That in retrospect, these days are in fact the worst days because of what they do to all the others. If it was uninterrupted pain, it'd be less painful. But no. This is the real sickness, my commiserative friend tells me, because this is the part you can control, where any rational person would tell you to just let it lie, because it will not, in earnest, ever get better. This is life rooting for the New York Jets. It wasn't always this way. This immaculately vexed dumpster fire of an exactly one-ring circus masquerading as a football team. They were once, well, okay. Certainly okay enough to infect the heart of an impressionable young boy and metastasize into something resembling identity. On Sundays in the fall, my dad would pick up my brother and me from Temple Sherry to Philo and schlep us over to Section 309, our uncle and cousins in tow, to watch our boys emulate the body and spirit of the gritty old stadium in the Meadowlands. This was the community, religion, to which Hebrew school only aspired. But hark, how grit decays. As I stand here, the Jets hold the longest active playoff drought across all teams in all 4 major sports. In a league designed for parity, where bad teams are rewarded with high draft picks, the Jets' crests barely sniff mediocrity. And that old temple in the Meadowlands was supplanted by something closer to a hospital, brimming with bitterness and resentment, bland food and blankets. The new MetLife Stadium, where the lights are too bright and the price to dull the pain too high. They can't get out of their own way. Promising quarterback? No worries. A third-string special teamer will break his jaw in the locker room over a poker game. Beloved player traded or stabbed in an altercation with a delivery man that he picked in a felony that he was indicted for. Some posit that Joe Namath sold his soul to the devil in 1969, or that Jimmy Hoffa's buried under the stadium, vengefully claiming Achilles and ACLs from the mob's favorite squad. Whatever the case, pity devolves into punchline. Just 2 years ago, my brother and I took his eldest, Bo, then 3, to his first Jets game, where he screamed Jets, let's go baby, until the sun fell. Now, at 5, more aware and emotionally mature, Bo remarked with a jade, "We left before the winning started." "Why do you still even watch?" a friend once inquired in college. He's from Bayonne, ostensibly a fan, though apparently reformed, rehabilitated. "They'll kill you," as Larry David once famously contended. I scoffed. But now, years later into this desolate drought, married, on the brink of my own family and customs therein, I wonder, is it worth ruining a third of the year's Sundays? Bringing children into this life they didn't ask for either. When every time they respond with their favorite team, they're given condolences. I'm sorry. Truly, why? No, sorry, I'm not done. Yeah. I wish I was. It's not loyalty, as some like to believe. It's not masochism. It's not even choice itself. It's sickness. Diluted, ever-present sickness, a pestering popcorn kernel lodged in the brain, inducing that hysterical hypothetical. What if? Imagine holding hands with my child as the clock ticks down 2, 1, my ailing uncle bear-hugging my now grown nephew, brandishing that picture of him back in 2023 in that baby Zach Wilson jersey. They hoist the Lombardi on TV as tears adorn the edges of grins unchecked. And yes, if I do meet my maker before then in her New England Patriots jersey, I'll get to look down on my kids with theirs, belting Jets in unison as they did at our wedding and at our funeral, right in God's face. Imagine. Then it'll all be worth it. Edward McCann, an award-winning writer, producer, is the founder of Writers Read. For over a decade, Ed and a team of dedicated volunteers have worked to present hundreds of stories at dozens of high-quality events like this one, with partners like Carnegie Hall, Bryant Park, Vassar College, and the National Arts Club. Ed's own writing has appeared in many journals and magazines, including Country Living, The Irish Echo, and The Sun. Ed and his partner, Richard Kolath, share their Gardner home and studio with a Louisiana rescue mutt named Willie. And Ed closes our show with his essay entitled Green Bananas. Please give a warm welcome back to Ed McCann.
Thank you, Hunter, for that obituary. I stole that line from Malachi McCourt, by the way. I met Richard in his 50th year, a new friendship with a country neighbor that already seemed fully formed. With my dog riding shotgun, I soon began traveling to his old farmhouse to assist with his design work, first on weekends, then in the evenings. Then I quit my job to become his partner in a new shared business. I enjoyed the work and the pleasure of our time together, the ease, the trust, the simpatico, the simple pasta meals, and what I wasn't yet ready to acknowledge as love. We've now been partners in life and work for almost 30 years. We share a home, office, studio, and virtually every meal, most of them in deep conversation, contentment, and gratitude. Richard has always been active, playful, and engaged with deep reserves of energy, compassion, curiosity, and seeming good health. But in his 60s, he experienced episodes of lightheadedness, one of which caused him to momentarily lose sight while behind the wheel. The cause of this near blackout was an unusually low heart rate. With a pacemaker to maintain him at a minimum of 60 beats per minute, he seemed back to his old, young self. Aging itself is not an illness, but Richard has now been treated for skin and prostate cancers, for chronic, severe obstructive sleep apnea, and recently, a mysterious GI bleed whose diagnosis and repair required swallowing a blinking camera the size of a multivitamin. He rarely complains, he always declines an offer of pain medication, and he walked out of the hospital unassisted the morning after his hip replacement. I'm grateful for the privileged access to medical interventions that have improved, enhanced, and lengthened Richard's life and our life together. I'd been reluctant to acknowledge that first sign of his slow-motion heart failure, an unsettling diagnosis and term that we have now had time to adjust to, if not exactly accept. We even laughed when a fellow cardiology patient in a waiting room joked that maybe Richard should no longer be renewing 3-year magazine subscriptions or buying green bananas. Along with meetings and flights and deadlines, our calendar was now flagged with Richard's new regular doctor appointments. When I'd asked what he'd learned after one cardiology visit, Richard told me everything was fine, but the only details he could actually share were about the cardiologist's mother and her recent vacation to South America. I soon began joining him and taking notes at all his medical appointments. And over nearly 20 years, those notes tracked 2 pacemaker changes, 2 ablations, and 2 cardioversions, all to control and regulate the pacing of his heart, which, for the past few weeks, has been in persistent atrial fibrillation. His upper chamber is beating at its own rapid, irregular rhythm. And we'll soon head back to the Heart Center for an appointment with the electrophysiologist to learn possible next steps. Perhaps another cardioversion, think shock paddles administered under light sedation, or an AV node ablation, which is a surgical procedure to sever the electrical connection between the upper and lower chambers, making Richard 100% dependent on his pacemaker to keep the beat. The cardiologist and his team of, quote, plumbers and electricians are working to slow the progression of Richard's heart failure, managing symptoms, making small changes in his medication, and keeping us informed about what options remain. Meanwhile, our primary care doctor says the keys to a good life are to simply eat well, sleep well, and eat well, and live well. And so Richard and I will continue working, feeding the birds, and planting more flowering bulbs in anticipation of another shared spring. We will continue living the life we share with a silly dog who makes us laugh and makes us walk, in the home that we built, all within the embrace of a community of neighbors and friends whom we love and who add a rich dimension to our lives. We will do our best to navigate the road ahead with humor and grace, and we will continue buying green bananas. Let's have all the writers come up here. All the writers, come join me on stage. Everybody up? Everybody up. Danielle, would you come on up?
Thank you, Ed, and thank you to all of our wonderful readers. What an incredible way to kick off BLR's 25th anniversary. If you haven't read BLR yet, get yourself some copies outside. 2 for $20. Special deal for the 25th anniversary. There's also bookmarks on your table. Please take them. And they have QR codes. Join our newsletter list, and you can find out all the upcoming events. Speaking of events, We invite you to join us this coming Thursday evening for conversations on creative writing and healthcare. This event is free. It's online and it's live, featuring 3 best-selling authors, Susanna Cahalan, Damon Tweedy, and Sarah Labrie, QR code outside. And I hope you'll consider making a contribution to help kick off BLR's next 25 years. In times like these, you couldn't ask for a better prescription for a warm, welcoming, and creative community. Thank you so much for being here.
Writers Read was built around events like this one, and it is humbling and electrifying to spend this kind of curated time in the presence of so many talented writers. And I am so proud of what a small group of committed unpaid volunteers continues to build with me. We are working to scale up and to present more writers and develop more followers and listeners and make the work of talented writers available to an even wider audience. The funds that keep the wheels turning come from you, our friends and our donors. Your donations are an investment in our mission. And I ask that you please consider a tax-deductible gift today and any amount to help us get there. There's a scannable code on a banner in the lobby that'll take you right to that page. But another way that you could help us is take your program home. Don't leave it behind. Give that program to someone in your life who you think will be interested in what we do, either appearing on our stage or supporting our mission or joining our board. That would mean a great deal to us. And thank you again to City Winery's founder and CEO, Michael Dorr, for his support of our efforts here today. We cannot do what we do without your support, which is why this round of applause from us is for you. Please stick around for some more wine and conversation with the writers and each other. We're going to be hanging out in the gallery for an hour, but before you go, we have this one last thing to do. We have not rehearsed it, so bear with us. Come on up front. Come on up.
Here, you gotta go around.
All right, everybody, in 3, 2, 1, down we go. Thank you.